Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll give another public analysis on commodities, just like yesterday, and the reason for that is that several commodities had an interesting price development today. The commodities that we'll look at today are gold, silver, West Texas oil, corn, and wheat. Let's begin. If we first look at gold, we see this range that is also explained earlier in the first public analysis on the commodities. Not only for gold but also for the other commodities, these ranges are explained, as well as why I made all the drawings, all the levels, the marked levels. So if you are interested in how I derived them, please check the older video, and for today we'll only look at the recent price developments for gold. So if we look at the lower time frame on the 1 hour time frame, we see that gold had the strong low that's earlier mentioned as well. So there were lower highs and lower lows formed, after which a higher high got formed with a pullback that was a higher low. So in other words, the higher high that got formed was higher than these two swing highs, and after which gold tended to move into a range that is best seen on this 1 hour time frame. If we look at what happens today in particular, we see that gold made quite a big move to the upside. That happens right here. And what we see is that before this, that gold had a small downtrend and went under the 1 hour range. But today, gold moved back into the range with quite a lot of volume. As you can see, a couple of volumes, consecutive volumes that had a higher average volume than all the candles before this. So all the past 21 candles, I should say, before this. So gold had a convincing move back into the range, and what I'm looking for is more or less for this 15-minute fair value gap that gets filled, and that would fill this volume imbalance, as you can see here. Although gold may look like to move more to the upside, I still wait for this possibility and then just to check for a long trade setup. For silver, there is a pretty similar move that happened earlier today. And if we look at the higher time frame range, we see that silver moves under the range and is busy with a deviation that takes a longer time compared to the other deviations that were under this range. And if we look at the lower time frame, it had a strong low as well, just as gold. And after the strong low, there was a specific range that I'm looking at for silver, for which holds that, yesterday it filled in this fair value gap with the extreme volume imbalance. And yesterday I told that I would wait for silver until it would eventually fill this fair value gap as well. That did not happen. Instead, silver moved back into the range with quite convincingly, just as gold, and it even made a bigger pullback back into the range, so back at the boundary of the range. And after that, I entered in during these price levels, so at the higher low that formed on the 15-minute time frame. And now I'm waiting for silver to continue this range and to potentially go into the bigger range. And of course, if that may happen, then it could be a great possibility, simply because it could move back into the bullish order block and to move potentially to the point of control of silver. But this is just something that may happen in the future. For now, again, we're just looking at the smaller movement, so just the movement within this range on the 1 hour time frame. So that's it for silver, just a level to level management, and to have a trailing stop loss that would follow this range accordingly. The next commodity that we'll check is oil. And just as explained earlier in another analysis, oil had a huge uptrend from last year until now due to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. and after which gold tended to range within these two levels. And yesterday, after I made the English commodity analysis, I took a trade for oil, and specifically a short trade. So what happened was that this fair value gap got filled in, and in particular the part that had the volume imbalance. And after filling this in, it moved a lot quite harshly, and it moved below this swing low and eventually made a downtrend. There was a market structure break, and it had a downtrend on the 1 hour time frame. And what I did was I entered silver at the upper part of this fair value gap, also because there was a volume imbalance. So we can remove this right now, but that was more or less where I entered, so at 118.55, and I had this fair value gap in mind. That's for the potential stop loss, because it also has a volume imbalance, and there is a possibility that oil may move and fill in this fair value gap before going lower. If oil were to move even higher than this fair value gap, then this trade setup could get invalidated quite quickly, simply because if it moves above the swing high, then the downtrend is not present anymore and the trade setup is invalidated. Also, what doesn't help is that on the higher time frame, this is not supported in particular. So despite the range that is present on the higher time frame, oil was in a, or still is technically in a uptrend. So the trade I made was simply meant for the lower time frame, and I applied a small risk. For as of right now, it's with success, but it's a small risk due to a trade being against the higher time frame. Also, what I did after the Dutch video, I changed the stop loss to below this fair value gap, simply because price moved in the direction of it but didn't fill it in. And my expectation would be that if oil moves back into this same direction, that it would not only fill this fair value gap but could potentially be even, or go even higher before making a reversal eventually. So this is why I have a trailing stop loss, a pretty tight stop loss, and I'll just move level to level with me being convinced that the fair value gap will not get filled, given that we continue this downtrend. So in other words, I moved the stop loss right now below the fair value gap. And the ideal thing for oil that I would like to see is for oil to move back with a similar movement as this, just to move back into the value area and to go potentially to the point of control and or the value area low. And ideally, of course, if the whole range gets filled in, then it would be great if oil goes into the bullish order block, after which I would be very strict before being confident that it would go even lower than that. But those are just future steps. Right now we just look level to level, and we see that oil so far goes in our favor. But this is simply something we need to be patient about and to monitor it on the lower time frame. The last two commodities to check today are corn and wheat, and what's actually to say is a pretty similar thing. So for corn, as mentioned earlier in another analysis, one of the levels that I looked at was this weekly level. And what happened for corn was that it moved today it moved past the weekly level. So this level did not look like it would bounce the price at all. And the reason I looked at this level is simply because corn tended to consolidate around these levels, so between this weekly and daily level, before it moved to the upside. I expected corn, or at least I thought there would be a possibility for corn to do something similar, to have a similar movement. I expected corn to have a bounce. Well, it did not happen, As you can see, price moved with an extreme volume imbalance. It moved below this this boundary, so this weekly level, and as of right now it looks like it may be go above the weekly level, but this is something that we should just monitor after the video. We should just take into account. But for now there is no long setup to take yet, so maybe if it moves with quite a convincing manner and then it bounces off, then there might be a possibility to go for a long and to have this point of control in mind and potentially even the daily level before going further. This is just a possibility. I'm not sure whether it would happen at all. We would just need to wait before it even bounces off the weekly in the first place. And lastly, here we see a similar thing happening, but instead with the daily level instead of the weekly. So I was waiting for it to bounce on the daily level, and on the lower time frame a similar correlated move with corn, of course, and we saw that it moved beyond the daily level, so it went lower than the daily level and it did not bounce, or we did not recover this area yet. Simply something we need to wait at as well, but for now no long setup for wheat either. So if it recovers this daily level, if it stays in this value area, then there is a possibility to go for a long, but otherwise if price just moves below this, then I would not look for a long yet. Alright guys, this was the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned from it as well. Please like, subscribe and turn on the notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next analysis.